Hello fear seekers, and welcome back to the channel. Have you ever seen something that is completely unrecognizable? Perhaps you were mistaken. Yes, that must be it. But if that thing really was just a common woodland critter, why did the noises it made, its dimensions, and even its gait seem so unidentifiable? Today, we're going to be diving into some disturbing, allegedly true, cryptid horror stories. Now, it is a dream of mine to read subscriber horror stories someday. With that in mind, I'd ask that you subscribe to the channel and like the video so we can make that happen together. If you have any scary stories from your own life, feel free to submit them to the email in the description. I would be honored to read them. Now, without further ado, sit back, put any idea of sleep away, and get ready to ferment your fears. I lived in Waynesboro, Virginia for about 5 years. Less than 10 miles to the BRP north entrance, Skyline Drive south entrance. I used to take bike rides along SD all the time and always kept a year-long membership. Only in the day though, just to frame the story. One night, I was having a particularly hard time settling in for bed, so I decided to start up the bike and ride up to the first overlook on Skyline, only about a mile inside the park. It was about 11 p.m. when I got up there, and pitch black. I killed the bike and got immediately uncomfortable. I'm not a guy that gets spooked in the dark. Truthfully, I prefer the dark in most situations. You can see people before they see you. You are practically invisible unless someone is looking for you, and I find the natural privacy comforting. Not up there, though. It was a thick, oppressive dark. Worse than anything I experienced outside of a cave, and worse than any moonless night on the Appalachian Trail. I immediately got hinked out, big time. There's nothing up here besides wildlife, I reassured myself internally. I had my .44 mag revolver, from when I lived/hiked in the Pacific Northwest, bear country and all that jazz, tucked into my CCW holster, so I knew I definitely outmatched anything that could be up there, two-legged snakes included. So I sat in the dark, leaning against the bike for a while and looking at the few lights I could see in the valley below. I managed about 10 minutes before I physically felt the hair rise on the back of my neck. I only did 27 months in Iraq, but I remembered that precise feeling. Someone was watching me. Something bad was coming. It was the same sensation I would get before IDF came in, or the shooting started somewhere nearby. I'm no psychic or whatever, but it's a common thing among vets with any time under their belt. Ask them about it. You can feel hateful eyes on you. The overlook was a sheer drop, or nearly so I wasn't concerned about anything popping up in that direction, but the mountainside and thick, untamed woods were behind me. I started thinking about methed out dudes creeping the Appalachian Trail, bears and the like. The AT is no stranger to random violence. Still feeling creeped out, I took up a seat on the waist-high stone wall that marked the overlook edge, facing the woods. Again, I can't emphasize how dark it was. But Gree, you might say, why not turn on the bike and use the lights? It'll at least help you see what's close. True, but my bike is loud, and the last thing I wanted was attention. Plus, the light would just night blind me to anything just out of view, and the noise would obscure any stealthy-sounding creeping going on. So, no thanks. I'll watch and listen for a bit. I sat in the dark for another 10 minutes or so, anxiety getting worse and worse. I heard a few things, but nothing out of the ordinary for a night in the woods. I decided to head on home, since the feeling wasn't going away. Like I said, I had a big boar on me, so anything playing games would be in for a powerful surprise if the games got stupid. Hopping onto my Suzuki, I started it up and rode off towards the gate. Now, anyone who lives in the country and rides a bike knows that wildlife is crazy active on roads that aren't traveled often at night. Being nighttime, and technically closed, I had to ride around a gate to get in. There were no other vehicles on the road at all. I hadn't seen a single other person since leaving Waynesboro proper. The speed limit was 30 miles per hour, but I clipped along at a measly 15 to keep an eye out for deer and wildlife. It wouldn't do me any good to mess myself up in a wreck, only to lay there all night until someone happened to cross me in the morning. Then I saw it. The term of almost deer is really fitting. Not quite, but accurate. It was like a deer that someone who had never seen a deer drew, but only after someone else described it to them. It stood on the left side of the road, the mountainside, and I saw the eyes long before my headlight fully showed it. It was big, easily the biggest deer I've seen, and the lack of any horns that time in the year suggested that it was a doe. The head was almost bovine in shape, but fixed to a deer's frame. The legs seemed too long in proportion to the body, think maned wolf proportions, and the body was extremely barrel-chested. I've always been creeped out by malformed wildlife, and this was no exception. Unfortunately, I had to get it to move, or risk passing within a few feet of it. I was not traveling another 30-plus miles up the road in the other direction to leave through another gate in the middle of the night, and I wasn't getting close to it. Dangers of it spooking and running into the side of my cruiser aside, I didn't want to get near it at all. Stopping and putting my feet down about 30 feet away from it, I tried to frighten it away. I flashed my beams down to low and back to high. Nothing. I revved the engine. Nothing. I honked the considerable horn. Nada. Resting the bike on the kickstand, I left it idling and hopped off. I yelled at the thing and it still didn't budge, so I started to the side of the road to grab something to toss near the deer thing, hoping to spook it that way. As soon as I crossed into the other lane, it rose up on its hind legs. I froze, putting my hand on my gun. I wasn't about to get charged by an angry, confused, malformed doe. It took two jerky, unnatural steps towards the center of the lane on two legs and froze again, staring directly at me. It suddenly shook its head wildly like a dog with a toy, took another short step, then hopped on two legs several times until it disappeared into the darkness on the right side of the road. I stepped back to the bike, mounted it, kicked up the kickstand, and turned the light towards the side of the road. On that side, there was a sheer drop of about 75 to 80 degrees compared to the roadway, and the damn thing's head was just peeking over the edge, still looking at me. The drop-off was about 40 to 50 feet, so there's no way it was standing at the base of the mountainside. I cracked the throttle and beat the hell out of there. Road wildlife be damned. I never went back up on Skyline Drive at night alone after that. One time was enough. There are things we don't grok out there, or things that just visit for a while. Whatever it wasn't from around these here parts in Hill Talk. It can go back to wherever it came from, and stay there. I recently recited this story to a friend that mentioned it could have been a particular cryptid that is apparently bad luck to mention. I'd like to know what y'all think. I've typed it as I would tell it around a campfire, since that's how good cryptid stories ought to be told. Back in 2016, I was working at a summer camp in western Pennsylvania. It was my third summer there, and by far my favorite so far. As a high schooler, spending months away from home in the woods was a dream come true, especially given that the months were spent working with kids or veterans, with the occasional interesting school group or corporate group. Most of my work was maintenance, logistics, or facilitation, but occasionally I was put on as a counselor for a team with children. The days were long, but after we finished our duties, we were free to string up our hammocks and sleep anywhere we'd like around the camp, so long as we didn't disturb any groups. It was late in the season, so by this night, myself and my two buddies were plenty comfortable with the area and decided to sleep at the edge of the furthest cabin loop. We triple-stacked our hammocks, one above the other on the same two trunks, and started a fire just before the last daylight retreated from the trees. The edge of this loop was quite far away from the HQ cabin and chow hall, so any light from the night shift lamps died out long before it reached us. The cabin we were by, a bit more dilapidated than the rest of our cabins, was on the outside edge of the trail, which represented the extent of our camp before miles of forest. This section in particular had denser underbrush, the outside edge of the trail being lined by a wall of briars a couple yards thick and just over head height, almost like a hedge wall. The cabin's steps fell out onto the trail, and just across from that was the fire pit. Our triple stack was a few yards from the fire pit, still on the near side of the trail. We stayed up for a few hours and chatted about whatever popped into our high schooler brains. Body counts, the military, music. The campfire slowly died down as we talked, and as the flickering lights pulled back from the cabin and briar wall to slink back into the embers of the pit, we decided to call it a night. We snapped a photo of ourselves in front of our stack and climbed up to sleep. As I lay there waiting to sleep, it occurred to me that the forest wasn't right. There were no nighttime bugs making their usual ambience, no frogs. Even the rustling of the leaves in the breeze was dampened. And the breeze, it was colder than any night previous, and colder than any July night ought to be. The lack of ambience seeped into me. Every pop from the low glowing embers in the pit echoed amongst the trees and struck my nerves. I strained to hear anything, hoping for the crickets to come back. And then it started. Thup, thup, thup. Out past the briar wall, some kind of noise was heard, felt, bounding and reverberating across the trunks. Thup, thup, thup. It sounded almost like an axe striking a tree, but too soft on the tail end. And at this time of night? Thup, thup, thup. And it's a bit fast for that. Steady, but no one could draw back an axe and strike again that fast. At least not with enough force to make such a solid noise. Thup, thup, thup. It's almost like it's growing louder, and always in an exact set of 3. I opened my hammock and turned my head towards the outer edge of the trail, towards the noise. I could just make out a dim orange light in the woods past the briars. Thup, thup, thup. No, no, no. That's not growing louder. It's coming closer. I looked down to my friends and feebly asked if they heard the noise. The fear in their half-whispered yeses struck me through the frozen air. Thup, thup, thup. It couldn't have been more than 10 yards away behind the briar wall now, and we all knew it. Without a word, we sprung from the hammocks and started stuffing everything in our day packs as fast as we could. It felt like we were packed in seconds and started running past the fire pit to head down the hill, towards Camp Maine. Thop, thop, thop. It was just behind the briar wall now, but we were packed, ready to run. And yet, it felt like it was all I could hear. I suddenly felt a pull. I turned back towards the briars and could see a dull orange glow seeping through the twisted limbs of the thicket now. And I just wanted to see. My friends could see my intention. One pleaded with me, "We have to go now. What are you doing?" I remember replying, "If we don't look now, we'll never know. Just one look, and we go." I stepped towards the wall, and it felt so right. My second friend grabbed my shoulders, and as soon as he touched me, it felt like my head was swimming. Before I could reply or protest, he started pulling me down the path towards Maine. I remember feeling warmer the closer we got towards the central camp. Admittedly, we ran the entire trail back, but it was like the forest thawed. The insect chatter came back first, then the frogs, then the leaves on the wind. The wood regained its usual inviting feel. We slept on the floor of the dining facility. I can't say why I suddenly felt so compelled and so sure that I needed to go past the briar wall and look that night, or what would have happened if my friends didn't stop me. All I know is that we stuck to Camp Maine for the rest of the season, and that when we looked in the morning, the photo we took had 3 dull orange orbs floating across the background. So to give some backstory, I live in a small town in rural Maine in the middle of nowhere, where my nearest neighbor on my road is about 3/4 of a mile to a mile away, and my backyard consists of miles of thick and dense woods. I am away at college at this time, and my parents want to go away for the weekend, leaving me to come home for the weekend to take care of my dog and cat. I had spent much of my childhood fascinated with nature and all of the animals and wildlife around me, enough to the point where my parents were comfortable letting me go off on my own to explore the nearby woods at a very young age, as long as I was armed with my hatchet/gun when I was old enough, so I am pretty familiar with all the local areas, animals, and noises that they make, as I have either done tons of research on or seen/heard firsthand most of the things you see and hear in Maine. My dog is the friendliest dog you will ever meet. She is a brindle-colored, medium-sized mix between a German Shepherd and Collie that loves to meet people and see new animals, including porcupines a few times, unfortunately. And typically, when she encounters a deer or something in the woods while tied off to go to the bathroom, she will let out an innocent little whimper and yelp out of frustration that she can't run over to greet and sniff them as she'd like to do with all people and animals. Again, the sweetest and least aggressive dog you will ever meet. On this particular early September night I will be talking about, I had to let my dog out to go to the bathroom before I went to bed around 11:30 p.m., and I noticed that the area of woods around my house was unusually quiet, which is typically an indication that a predator is nearby, possibly the pack of coyotes that hunt near my house, bobcat, or even a black bear. Either way, it was quiet enough that I kept an eye on my dog as she did her thing from inside the house, as even in September it is cold in Maine. I had put my head down to check my phone, and then I start hearing a vicious growl and snarl followed by a deep and aggressive bark coming from my dog, which are 2 things I have never heard from my dog ever. Like I said, she is the friendliest and least aggressive dog you will ever meet. I have a hard time seeing anything past my immediate yard with my back porch light, so I open my back door and look in the direction my dog is barking and growling, and what I saw immediately made me jump and sent chills down my spine. I see 2 glowing bright red eyes looking at us through the immediate tree line about 20 or so yards away. It looked like LED lights, they were so bright and vibrant. I am a very rational, science-oriented, logical thinker with a lot of knowledge about the Maine woods, and I immediately started thinking about what the hell this thing is as I locked my eyes with it frozen in fear. And then it came to me that it is possibly an owl, as I remember seeing some at night in my camp a few towns over as a kid. I have only ever seen yellow-eyed owls at night. If you haven't seen this before, look it up. It's terrifying seeing these unexpectedly in the woods at night. I then remembered that some owls' eyes can glow red at night and turned my train of thought to it being an owl, calming my mind. My dog is still going crazy, growling and barking like I've never heard her do before, and continues to do so, and I just assume it's because maybe she's never seen an owl before or whatever, and I disregard it, but still find the aggression kind of odd. I call for my dog to come in a few times and she's still going nuts, so I have to go out to physically grab her and get her inside. I walk off my deck, keeping an eye on the glowing red eyes watching the two of us, and as soon as my foot leaves the porch, the eyes disappear, and I hear twigs snapping and leaves rustling rapidly for a few seconds, then stopping and going the opposite direction of me and my dog. With one foot on the porch and the other on the grass, this is where I froze and went, "Holy crap, that's not an owl," and immediately went back into what the hell panic mode. I scream at my dog to get over to me now, still oblivious to me yelling to her, and she's still going nuts. I run as fast as I can to her and literally pick up my dog and sprint as fast as I can back to my house, where I lock all of my doors and grab my 9mm Glock 19 handgun and mag flashlight I keep next to my bed. With my dog still going ballistic, I take a peek out my window and see nothing in the same area it was before, and go back to my back door with my 9mm and crappy old mag flashlight that only works in the wide angle mode that doesn't let the light travel very far but covers a wider area. When I step out onto my porch, sure enough I see the eyes again, about 25 yards back instead of 20. Whatever this thing is, it's not afraid of my dog going crazy at it, but got spooked by me getting closer earlier. From my porch I yell out, "Hello?" For some reason, even though I know it's not a person. As I'm shining my light in its direction, I hear nothing except a twig or two snap near it, indicating it's standing and moving slightly, but the eyes do not move. Not one bit. Whatever this is clearly moved back a few yards and slightly more to the right while I was grabbing my gun. I start walking towards it with my gun drawn and aimed in its direction in case this thing charges at me. I get about 5 yards off from my porch and this thing again makes twigs and leaves snap rapidly, running back about 5 yards and looks back at me. This thing clearly wants to keep about 20 yards distance from me. I get a little bit closer and I see the eyes close and suddenly disappear. No noises. Nothing. The eyes are gone, and I haven't heard it move an inch, so I retreat back to my house out of fear and keep an eye out my window for a few minutes before building up the courage to go back outside to try to find out what this is. I get outside and see nothing. The woods still have a silent, bone-chilling quietness to them as I scan the tree line for the red eyes. After scanning for a minute or so, I decide to walk off my porch to make sure whatever it is isn't still close by, and maybe I can spook it again by getting closer. I'm about 5 yards from the tree line, shining my very dim light into the woods, and nothing. That's when I heard the local pack of coyotes off in the distance to my left start doing their noises that they make when they get a kill. Look this up too if you don't know what I'm talking about. Super creepy when you're on edge already and outside at night. So I heard the coyotes to my left, and for some reason I bring my flashlight over with my head to the left, and then to myself I say, "Yep, that's probably enough for me tonight," and put my flashlight down and turn to my right to start walking back to my house. A mere 10 yards away from me, I see those damn eyes looking directly into my soul, still as can be, no blinking. Nothing. I bring my flashlight up, and as I'm bringing it up, the eyes disappear and I see a large black outline that looked like it was on 2 legs and very large. I couldn't really tell what it was since I only saw it for a split second. It was running on its hind legs, sprinting, and I mean sprinting, like the fastest I have ever heard anything run in the woods. Faster than anything should be able to run in the woods that thick towards the direction of the coyotes, which is very unusual for animals to run towards noises like that, unless they are hunting them. I just about peed myself in that very moment and fired about 4 rounds into the ground to let whatever or whoever that was know that I was armed and not messing about. I sprint back up to my porch, ears ringing from not having earplugs in, and let off another 8 rounds into my backyard for good measure, emptying my clip and running back into the house to grab a new one. Once I retrieve my other clip from my gun, I go back out to let off a few more shots to make sure it's gone. Once I'm back outside, the coyotes have stopped doing their kill sounds, which is not unusual as they don't typically do it for more than 45 seconds to a minute. As I'm about to let off a few more rounds, I hear from the same area the coyotes were, a coyote scream bloody murder and yip in pain. Something had just slaughtered it and likely took it in the pack's kill. I have a feeling it is the red-eyed thing I saw earlier as it took off in a dead sprint towards their direction. After hearing the coyote get brutally murdered, I did not see or hear anything the rest of the night, despite doing numerous check-ins for the next 2 hours, letting off a few rounds here and there to let it know I haven't forgotten about it. Needless to say, I did not sleep much that night and had both my pets sleep in my locked room with me and my gun. The next morning I called my uncle, who is a game warden in a town a few hours away, to tell him what I saw, and he said it was probably a fox or bear. I told him I didn't think it was because it looked like it was on 2 legs and much bigger than and higher up to the ground than a fox and ran much, much faster than a bear, alongside having glowing red eyes. He told me I was probably just overreacting on its size, and it was probably a fox because of how fast it ran. I just told him he's probably right and let it go so he didn't think I was going crazy. I know what I saw that night, and I know how fast it was running, and those eyes were unnaturally large and bright red. I know that bears stand on their hind legs sometimes, but they do not run on them. At least not that fast. As much as I want to believe that was a bear that night, I just can't bring myself to believe it. I have no explanation for what it was. All I know is it did not fit the description of anything close to an animal native to Maine, and it was out for blood that night, stalking me and my dog. Like I said, I am a rational, science-oriented thinker, and am not one to believe in ghosts or Bigfoot or cryptids or anything of that nature without hard evidence. But what I saw that night terrified me, and probably will for the rest of my life. It's the only thing in my life that I truly cannot explain. This was 2 Septembers ago, so almost 3 years, and I have not seen anything similar to this since. I am still afraid of it to this day, and always keep an eye out on my dog when we let her out at night now. This happened 12 years ago, and to this day I still consider myself lucky. The morning was cool as we loaded into the ambulance, heading to a call at the edge of town. It was 6:12 a.m. and it was still dark outside. We were called in by the police station saying that there were multiple wounded and a few dead at what seemed to be a farm. We didn't actually know what caused the injuries, but we made our way to the scene. The address took us to a dirt road that led us to a home that had 2 police cars outside with their lights on, but we didn't see any officers posted. There was no one there. The home was attached to the farm that seemed to be either deserted or just really old, but my main focus was on the cop cars out front. Typically, when they were called to a scene, there is at least a police officer guarding us to where we needed to go. But there was no one this time. A situation like this could be dangerous. We could be heading into danger and not know it. The home's front door was open, but there weren't any lights on. There seemed to be blood on the front porch that led into the house. Having been in the field for 18 months, I was pretty hardened by multiple calls with car crashes and even a triple homicide. But something about this call was different. For the first time being on call, I was actually afraid. I decided that rather than just sitting around, that we should enter the home and try to find the injured people. I slowly entered the home with a flashlight and a medical bag. The blood that was on the porch led into the home and up the stairs. I made my presence known, but I got no response. I tried the lights, but they didn't work. What was going on in this place? As I searched the bottom floor for clues, I started to hear muffled sounds coming from upstairs. It sounded like something very heavy, being dragged across the floor. The other paramedics that were now with me also heard the sounds upstairs, but they also seemed to feel scared. We heard the dragging sounds continue upstairs, slowly moving to the top of the stairs. Not thinking, I began to walk to the stairs to see if there was anyone there. The blood on the stairs was thick, and it made it slippery since the floors were made of wood. I shined my light to the top of the stairs, having no idea what to expect. I slowly continued forward with the other paramedics behind me. We were halfway up the stairs when we saw a hand pull forward, a policeman who was on the ground. He continued to drag himself on the ground, revealing that his lower half was missing. "Get out of here before it sees you," he said with extreme pain. My medical training must have kicked in as I ignored his warning and I rushed to his aid at the top of the stairs. At the top of the stairs, I could see what remained of the officer and the trail of blood that he produced that came to another set of stairs leading to what appeared to be the attic. The two paramedics that were with me attended to the officer at the top of the stairs, and I ventured slowly to the stairs of the attic. Above me, I could hear sounds that I'm still not able to describe to this day, but they were terrifying in nature. Sounds that I assumed to be grunts or something very large eating. My flashlight was the only thing illuminating my path in the long hallway leading to the attic stairs. The hallway was long and unfurnished. I could see scratches on some of the walls and floors, although blood covered most of the floor. I had no idea what was happening here, or more importantly, what was still happening. But I assumed, due to the blood and lack of personnel at the scene, that there were many more that still required my help, although the scene was most likely dangerous. I've experienced violence before while on duty. Many people while in shock can become aggressive and numb to pain, which makes subduing them quite the task. I wasn't necessarily preparing for violence, although it's never outside the realm of possibility. I proceeded to the attic steps alone, flashlight in hand. I was tempted to announce my presence, but I decided against it. I had a feeling that I never experienced before, but the best way I could describe it was that I was about to meet the devil. The literal embodiment of evil was up these stairs. I walked up the stairs slowly, hearing sounds much clearer, sounds that didn't sound good at all. I was about to reach the top of the stairs when I heard a loud sound coming from downstairs and a rushing of people entering the home. I quickly turned around and ran down the stairs over to the other paramedics and the officer that was in grave condition. Coming up the stairs was a SWAT team in full gear. This would be the first and last time I'd ever see a SWAT team come to a scene. They ordered us all downstairs and told us to leave the officer. The officer was bandaged but unresponsive due to blood loss. They asked me, "Where is it?" sternly, and I pointed to the attic stairs. They rushed the stairs leading to the attic with their weapons drawn, and we went down the stairs. From the bottom floor, we could hear screeching and gunfire coming from the attic. A lot of gunfire. We were ushered outside by more members of the SWAT team. By this time, the sun was starting to rise, and not only did the SWAT team arrive, but also government officials in suits. They pulled us aside and asked us questions. They asked us what we saw and who all was inside. Thankfully, we hadn't seen much, so we told them the truth. I asked them what was going on and what was inside. They didn't answer me, and they told me to attend to the people that they would be bringing out. They brought out 7 bodies that day. 7 mangled bodies. None of them fully intact, however the one officer missing both legs ended up surviving. What happened here? What did they shoot in the attic? What was I about to see in the attic had the SWAT team not arrived? I'm glad that I wasn't one of those bodies. Hey guys, glad to see you made it to the end of the video. Have you or someone you know ever had any run-ins with a cryptid? Make sure to let me know in the comments below. As always, if you have any scary stories you'd like to be told, be sure to send them in. Alright guys, that just about wraps up the video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So long, Fear Seekers. I'll see you in the next video.